Welcome to Leader U by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Hello, and thank you for joining the Leader U podcast. I'm happy to introduce our amazing guest today. I have Dr. Sheldon Eakins here, and we are going to be discussing the leadership competency of appreciating others. Dr. Eakins is the founder of the Leading Equity Center. Dr. Eakins is also the host of the Art of Advocacy Livestream and the Leading Equity podcast. Furthermore, Dr. Eakins is the author of Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students. With over 15 years in education, he's served as a teacher, a school principal, adjunct professor, and director of special education. He is passionate about helping educators accomplish equitable practices in their schools. He has earned a BS degree in social science education, a master's degree in educational leadership, and a Ph.D. in K-12 education. Thank you for joining me today. I'm happy to have you on the podcast.
I'm excited. Thanks for having me, Angie. This is an honor. Thank you so much.
No problem. So I want to start off and telling why I had you be a guest on the Leader U podcast. And I think diversity is a very hot topic right now, and it's really relevant with what's going on in our society. And living in Idaho, we don't have as much diversity as other places that I've lived. I lived in China for 3 years, so got to experience a lot of diversity and be the minority. So I wanted to bring you in to get a perspective on what diversity looks like, and also more about just appreciating others and understanding people from different backgrounds have different perspectives. So I'm excited to hear what you have to share with us today. I'd like to have you start off with sharing your story. How did you end up having a PhD in K-12 education and being a podcast person and doing all the stuff you're doing?
You know, that's a long question. I don't know how much time we have for that. I do want to touch on something because I thought it was interesting when you said, living in Idaho, there's not a lot of diversity. And I would add to that there's diversity. It's just there's not a lot of racial diversity. And we can get into that later. But as far as my story, I started off teaching in the Virgin Islands. So fresh out of college, I did not look for a teaching job. I went to school I studied social science education. I wanted to be a history teacher, but I was working at a call center, and I was a supervisor. I was making pretty decent money. I was probably making more money than I would make as a teacher at that time. And so as a result, I didn't look for a teaching career or any of those kind of things. And then I got called in, and they told me, you know what? We're getting rid of your department, and we want you to basically start over from scratch. We're like your first day of working at the call center. And that moment right there was like, oh, shoot, I need to start looking for a job. And as a result, I started looking, but we were late August now. So schools have already started. There's no teaching jobs. And I'm sitting there on the couch playing video games with my brother. And I'm telling him, look, I don't want to go to work tomorrow. And I get a random phone call from a superintendent in the Virgin Islands. And he says, hey, I'm the superintendent in the Virgin Islands. We need a history teacher. Would you like to come? And I said, heck yeah, right? So I'm like,
yes.
First flight out, I'm headed to the Virgin Islands. I'm teaching there, enjoying that. And the thing about being on an island, like I'm black. And so I blend in until I start talking. Then people start saying, wait a second, he's a Yankee. He's not from here. Everybody is calling me a Yankee. But that really helped me understand some differences when it came to diversity. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it's not just about race. We often talk about race as far as part of being diverse. But, again, we were all black, but there was some differences. I came from the States. They were on the island. There's just a lot of different cultural norms that I just had to learn. Mm-hmm. So as I started teaching, I decided, I'm going to start working on my master's. And so I wanted to be a school principal at some point in my life. And I went and got my master's in leadership. And I got a teaching job in Louisiana, or a principal job in Louisiana. So we were back in the States, and I did that for a couple of years, started working on my PhD. I don't know. It took me 7 years to get through my bachelor's. But for some reason, after I got my bachelor's, master's, boom, 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 PhD, boom, 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 no big deal. It just kind of happened. And then I thought, okay, I got my doctorate now. I need to move into higher education. I need to become a professor. That was my goal. At least that's what I thought was supposed to happen. So I started looking around for jobs, and my dad was actually working at the local university here, and he's like, there's this job here. It's called Trio. You should apply for it. But I'm like, it's in Pocatello, Idaho. I'm not moving to Pocatello, Idaho, right? But he's like, put it in, you never know. So I was like, okay, fine. So I put in an application, and guess what? I got a job at Idaho State, and so I started working here. So I moved to Idaho. It's been 7 years now that I've been living in this state, and that's kind of my story.
Wow.
I never thought I'd end up here, but here we are.
Yeah, that's how life is, right?
Yeah.
You have all these plans, but life has different plans. So that's an amazing story. I love it. I had no idea that you had taught in the islands or anything.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Cool. So I'd like to know, what does appreciating others mean to you?
When you think about appreciating others, I mean, and that can go in all kinds of directions. If we're looking at it from maybe a diversity lens, then sometimes when I do a lot of training. I do a lot of consulting, especially with diversity, equity, inclusion. And a lot of times with the schools that I'm working with, the teachers, principals, whatever group I'm working with, they want to make sure that we can find common ground. Mm-hmm. That is often the goal. It's like, how, what are the, where's some commonality, or we're all part of the human race, so we're all the same in some sense. And what I try to let folks understand is, it's okay to be different, right? Your lifestyle might be different than my lifestyle. Your race might be different than mine. Your language, your culture, your gender, whatever it is, it might be different, and that's totally fine. How do we appreciate that and recognize that is a difference? Sometimes I have individuals that, personally, again, lifestyle might be different than what I'm used to or something that I would do. However, that's what they do. What I believe and what my thoughts shouldn't change anything for them. And so that to me is appreciating others. It's okay to embrace the differences that we all have. We're not all the same. And I think that's totally fine. So that would be, if we were going in that direction, that would be my thoughts on what appreciating others should be like.
Yeah, I love that. It's one of the things I'm thinking when you say that, what I'm hearing is minimizing fear about people being different than you. Or that maybe if you affiliate with somebody that has differences, that it might rub off on you, or it might make you think differently. It just basically kind of getting to that lack of fear and just really being curious and trying to figure out, oh, wow, that is interesting. I've never even looked at life from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, here's the thing. We tend to hang around people that are like us, right? What am I going to talk about if I don't have, if I hang around people that, if I watch the NBA and I like sports or whatever it is, I tend to hang around people that watch sports and NBA or whatever it is as well. Football, same teams. We tend to kind of gravitate, and it's human. It's just natural.
We hire those people, too.
We hire those people. That's all. Yeah. And so those are some of the biases that we have. We tend to hang around folks that share a lot of the similar views, thoughts. Married people tend to hang around married people. People with kids tend to hang around people with kids. That's just how things are, and that's totally fine, right? But sometimes when we are interacting with individuals that don't have those same commonalities, we're trying to find out, how can we find this common ground, or what do you like? Okay, I kind of like that too, but we don't have to. It's okay to be different. And so I think sometimes there's a fear. Again, being a black man living in a state where there's 0.8% African American population in the entire state, I interact with people all the time, and I can just tell sometimes, they probably haven't talked to a lot of black people before because of how they are addressing me. Sometimes it's overly nice, like, hey, we're so excited you're here. Hey, welcome, come on in. I'm like, you don't have to talk to me like that. Just talk to me like you would talk to anybody else. Like, do you say that to everybody with that same enthusiasm with any new person, guest, or whatever it is? It's totally fine. It's okay just talk to me just like you would talk to anybody else. And I think sometimes it's just a little bit of fear for some folks and just level of comfort. It's like, I just don't have a lot of experience with individuals that are a little different than I am. And so as a result, I don't really know how to respond. I don't really know how to interact with them. But to me, just treat them like you would treat anybody else. Just talk to them the same way you would talk to your cousin, your mom, your dad, whoever it is. Talk to them the same way. You don't have to go out of your way to show someone, oh, you're welcomed in my environment.
Yeah, I love that. You said treat them how they like to be treated. And I heard this yesterday, and I think it's relevant. The golden rule is treat people how they'd like, or how you would want to be treated. And then I heard of a platinum rule, which is treat others how they would like to be treated.
The platinum rule.
The platinum
I've never
rule.
heard of that.
I hadn't either until yesterday. I had heard treat other people how they would like to be treated, but I'd never heard it be called the platinum rule. So that's a new one, and I think it's really relevant. So you would like to be treated like anybody would treat anybody else. And so I guess finding out what's important to people is the most important thing. Like, how do you want to be addressed? How do you want to be communicated with? We all have different communication styles. And so finding out and getting to know people, regardless of what they're like, is huge.
Yeah.
And it can breed collaboration and just getting connection.
But you have to be willing to ask those kind of questions.
You do.
Again, comfort level, right? Some folks are just, I don't know them that well, or even if I do know them, I don't know how to ask those type of questions. Sometimes I get people that would ask me stuff like, should I say black? Should I say African American? Should I say colored? Should I say Negro? What should I say? And I say, you know what? I don't speak for everybody in my community. However, I would recommend the safest way to just say black. And if they think otherwise, they will just correct you and say, I prefer to be African American or whatever it is. But the bottom line is not everybody that's black identifies as African American. You have people from the Caribbean that are considering themselves Caribbean American, or you have folks that are from Africa that say, I'm African. So I say that the best way, the safest way, is to just say black, say it with confidence, and then again, if they feel like it's something different, then they'll just say, I prefer this. No harm, no foul, no big deal. But again, sometimes people are just, I don't know. Can I really ask that question? Are you okay? And that can cause some challenges because there is a fear that if I say the wrong thing or if I ask the wrong question, then I might be perceived as, bigot or racist or whatever it is. And so there's that level of comfort that can be a challenge.
Yeah. Great points. I love that. So as you're consulting, so you're one of the people that we recommend. You are the person that we recommend as a partner that does diversity inclusion. That's one of the things that we don't offer in Black River, but we know it's super important, and we're not experts, so we stay out of that lane. But that's one of the reasons I want to have you here today, because I want to dive into what are some of the things that you see when you go into the workplace, the challenges, from boss to supervisor to just teams, and things where you're seeing a lack of appreciating others or a lack of diversity of thought, diversity of, like you said, not just racial things, but diversity of ideas even.
I come into a lot of spaces, and anytime I do a training, especially if I'm going to do a series of training, I always start with self-awareness. Because I can't tell you how many times I've come into various organizations and they say, oh, that stuff happens only on the news. That's not our organization. We're good, or I don't know why they brought you here. We're fine. We don't have any. And so I say, let's start here. Okay, well, let's look at some data. Because sometimes some of us live a life where these type of things aren't on our minds. Like, we don't have to consider, am I going to be the only person represented of my identity in this space? If I walk into a meeting, am I going to be, one of a handful of 100 people and it's just me? That's not a reality for everybody, right? But for some people, especially folks that are living a life where their identity is not often represented, that is something that they're consciously thinking whenever they walk into a space or interacting with other people. So when I walk into these organizations and I'm talking to an individual doesn't have these type of lived experiences, then they're like, oh yeah, no, we're good, or oh yeah, I know all our employees, we're fine. There's
we got this.
Everybody feels safe. Everyone feels welcome. We're all included. It's not a thing. So that's why I said let's start there first. Let's talk about that. How do you feel? Do you have any biases? And we break all of that down. And I think that part right there is the first step, is to really think about, have I had to ever consider these type of conversations? Have I ever had these experiences that some of my colleagues or my subordinates have had? And, what does it look like for them? And maybe can I see it from their perspective? That's the first start for me. And then that really can open up some dialogue. Sometimes we hear diversity training, folks will get triggered and it's, oh man, what is this going to be about? Am I going to be accused of something? Am I going to be called out? Like, what type of training is this going to be? Because a lot of trainings can be very abrasive, and they can be very triggering for a lot of people. The type of training that I do is not about, calling anybody out. It's not about accusing. It's just more of trying to provide some thought perspectives that maybe you have never considered. A lot of the stuff I talk about is my own experiences, or maybe family experiences, or things that I've witnessed or I've interacted with individuals about. We talk about it from that perspective. But again, it's not an accusatory approach. It's just more of, here's something I want you to consider that you probably have never considered. They often talk about, if I could just walk a mile in someone else's shoes. I don't necessarily subscribe to it in that sense. I do believe in the importance of empathy, but at the end of the day, there's certain situations that I will never be able to experience, or I'll never want to experience, or never have to have that happen. However, so I can't relate, but I can try to empathize with someone's perspective. Now, as a male, I don't think about walking down a street in a dark alley, am I going to be safe? That's just not something that I consider or think about. But you know what? I have a lot of women friends. That is definitely something that's on their mind. When it comes to being on camera, I remember I had I was telling a colleague of mine, I said, you know what? Oh, let's just turn the mic on. Let's jump on the Zoom. And she's like, well, I had to put on makeup. I need to make sure my hair is right and all these. I was like, oh, I don't necessarily have to think about that. I just jump on camera. I don't have to, make sure lipstick and blush and what do you call it? Eyelashes. I don't have to put none of that stuff. I don't have to think about that.
Yeah.
Right? So there's lived experiences that I'll never have to think about. However, I can try to empathize with someone who says, you know what, I need at least 2 hours before I can go on camera. Or I need at least a little bit, I need a flashlight or something. Or I need this or I need that. Even though it may not be something I need to be understanding of that. And I think a lot of the supervisors and organization, leadership, CEOs, and things like that, if that is not their lived experience, not saying that they're bad people, but it's just something that you don't think about. And we have to be open to those conversations. And so that's why I start with self-awareness.
Yep. It's the key to everything, really. Yeah. That's the first component of emotional intelligence, which is what I train on and coach on. So I think we have a lot in common in that area. I don't know that I've brought a lot of the diversity into it, but that's something I really want to dive into, but more about just finding out more about yourself, where your biases are, and understanding. And it's a journey, and it takes real work to actually look at your behaviors, look at your ideas, your beliefs, and examine them, and actually sometimes think, where did I even get this? Yeah. And where does it serve me, and am I going to keep it or not? Yeah. It has been quite a journey.
We all have biases. I have biases. Yeah. Everyone does. And some people tell me, oh, I treat all the people the same. No, you don't. We all do. And honestly, I work with educators, and I say, you know what, honestly, I don't want you to treat everybody the same. Because, you got students that are going to need a little extra time when it comes to turning in their assignments. You got some kids that are going to need some additional visuals. You got some folks that are going to maybe need to retake something, or they might need some additional support with reading or writing. So you don't want to treat everybody the same. If you treat everybody the same, then you're going to basically hit that middle area, but then you're going to have some folks that are above that. You're going to have some folks that are still, on their on their approach to those things. So one size doesn't fit all at the end of the day. But we all have biases, and it doesn't make us bad people. The stuff that I do, especially when I do implicit bias trainings or microaggressions, those type of trainings, is I express, okay, here's some of the biases that we have, and how do we overcome those biases? At the end of the day, we cannot eradicate biases. If I do a training for a day, and I tell people, I say, look, we're here for a day. At the end of the day, you will still have biases. Okay, I can't. I wish I had the magic wand,
Me too.
I could just do it, and then everyone is bias free. It's human nature, right? You mentioned, where do they come from? And it comes from where we were raised. It comes from our social circles, the conversations that we have at home, or the conversations we have, growing up at the dinner table, at Thanksgiving, all these different things, the TV stations that we watch, the news stations that we choose to watch. There's typically two main news stations out there, and depending on whichever one that I watch the most, tends to confirm a lot of my beliefs, a lot of my thoughts, and so that's what I tend to do. And so that's where all these biases come from: the music, the movies we watch. So all these things impact our beliefs and our decisions that we make. So again, it's impossible to eradicate all biases, but it's important to at least recognize and acknowledge that we do have them. And so if someone brings it to our attention, rather than saying, well, I didn't mean it that way, or you need to lighten up, maybe say, you know what, okay, it wasn't my intentions, it wasn't something I did on purpose, but tell me a little bit more.
Yeah,
Help me
absolutely.
understand. I really want to know where you're coming from. I'm listening. I'm here. I would like to know a little bit more, so that way it doesn't happen again. And just being open to these conversations. But often people get defensive. People shut down because they feel like you're calling them on something, again, because they felt like I didn't mean anything by it, or you're too soft and all these things. I just say, just be open to those conversations.
I love it. But I love being open-minded and growth mindset. That's really having a growth mindset, just being able to see that, there's always opportunities to learn. There's always opportunities to improve. None of us have arrived.
Yeah.
And I really believe that even on our deathbed, we still have moments to improve.
Oh, yeah.
And to give and to love and to actually change our mind.
Yeah.
I feel like changing your mind has become something that you're not allowed to do. Oh, you used to think this, or it's like, yeah, but I grew and I learned, and I'm not the same person. I don't feel like every year like I'm a different person, like constantly getting rid of a shell or a thing that is like, that doesn't serve me any longer. I'm growing. I'm in a new path of discovery, and it will never end.
Yeah. Unfortunately, stereotypes often play a factor. I had one experience with one individual who has a certain identity, and I just assumed that is the case for everybody. And so for other people, you're talking years and years of, again, like you said, this is my mindset, this is my beliefs, and then now I'm trying to unlearn some things, and it takes time. It doesn't, you didn't get those beliefs overnight, so it's not like those change of a thought process is not going to change overnight. And so sometimes we want things, we want that instant results. We want, that microwave change, and it doesn't always happen that way. It takes time. But again, we have to be willing and acknowledge, you know what, oh, shoot, I've been operating a certain way, and maybe this is very offensive to a certain group of people. Or the things I've said. There's a lot of common words or phrases that we utilize to this day that have a lot of origins that are discriminatory and can be challenged. However, it's what everyone says, so I think it's okay. But I always say, just because you've always done it this way, if you're aware that, you know what, I've been doing it this way and it needs to change, and if you still choose to continue to say it or use those phrases or operate a certain way, then that's something that you need to really wrestle with yourself. So.
Yeah, I love that perspective. If you're thinking about, we talk about that in organizations a lot too. I mean, and some of the challenges that come up with people is just exactly that, where they're not willing to mention that, maybe it's not the appropriate way. That maybe there's a better way.
Yeah.
Maybe we've been thinking about this all wrong. Maybe there's different opportunities. And sometimes even just going, oh, I didn't know, and now I do, and I'm going to change.
just move on instead of beating. And the other thing people do is beat themselves up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I've been a bad person or this,
I've done it.
Yeah. And it's like, you can't be responsible for what you're unaware of.
Yeah.
But once you're aware of it, then we all have a responsibility.
I look at it as life lessons. I used to be big on, early on, maybe a few years ago, I would say I was big on regrets and, oh man, I messed up and just beat myself up, can't sleep at night. Oh man, I missed an opportunity. I should have said something. I should have spoke up. Because I'm one of those people that likes to really reflect often. And so when things happen, it catches off guard. No one wakes up in the morning and say, you know what, I want to experience some bias today. Or like no one's, like we're not ready for it.
Yeah.
So it catches us off guard. We're not, we weren't prepared. We didn't have our go-to speech to say. And so how we respond in those situations is going to be different for a lot of people. Some people are immediately, they might get angry about it and they might respond in that way. Some folks take some time to reflect. I'm typically the person that once these things happen, again, getting caught off guard, I might just kind of choose to kind of sit back and kind of pull myself, get into my thoughts, and then maybe I might try to have a follow-up conversation later on. But again, some of us aren't ready. And again, no one's waking up just saying, I want to experience some discrimination today.
It's on my agenda. Put it on the to-do
put it
list.
on my task for today. No one's doing that. So it just catches us off guard, and we just have to, how are you going to respond in these type of situations, I think is important.
Have you read The Power of Regret by Daniel Pink?
No, I
It
have
is
not.
incredible. They have the World Regret Survey and the U.S. Regret Survey in there, and it would be, since you used to wrestle with it, I think I love the example of the tattoo on, I think, Where the Millers, where he has the regret tattoo and it's misspelled. And he says, no regrets, huh? Not even one little letter. Regrets. And so I think that, what they found is that people have regrets about things they didn't do, times they didn't stand up, times they didn't tell somebody they loved them. All of those at the end of life, those are the biggest regrets that people have. Generally, messing up is not what people regret because they learned from it, but they have more regret about the inaction.
Yeah.
And so it's an incredible book. I would love for anybody to read it. I used to have this mindset of no regrets, but I don't think that gets us anywhere. I think regrets actually help us to move forward and learn lessons.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a reflective person and you're like, I don't want to do that again, and not be too hard on yourself, but how am I going to change my behavior? And how am I going to not beat myself and think I'm a bad person because I made a mistake?
Yeah, life lessons is kind of where I've been at these days. It's like, okay, this situation happened, circumstance, there's nothing I can do about it at this point. What can I take away from this situation? What can I learn? How can I grow from the situation? How do I move forward?
Yep. One of the most impactful quotes that I've gotten from my coach right now is Peter Crone. His quote is, "What happened, happened, and it couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't."
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds harsh, but you think about anything that's happened in your life and how you wish it could be different and how you wish this, and all of that creates suffering. And to just release that, it happened, but how can I move on? How could I decide that's not the path I want for the future? And just create a new path or a new mindset or get a coach, have somebody help me, work me through this process because I don't understand it. And I think ego gets in the way.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, even with that, you got to have some sort of an accountability support, right? Because I'll be honest. I used to be big against any type of self-help books. And I was like, oh, that stuff is for suckers. That's not for me. I don't need those kind of things. And then when I started reading self-help books and looking at that information, finding YouTube videos, I was like, oh, I didn't know this at all. And I wouldn't even have known to ask these type of questions to find out this information had I not opened up this book, had I not watched this YouTube video. Oh, shoot, I'm on self-help books now. I like this now. This is actually self-helping. And so, but before I really thought I'm good. I can figure out these things on my own. I tend to be a very private person, so I was like, I'll figure it out. I'm a self-reflector, and I can work this out on my own time. But then I started opening up to more people, close friends, family members, and really asking them questions. And again, reading those books really has helped me. And I feel like these days I'm probably the 2.0 version, and that's just because I let folks in and I reached out for help, and I think those kind of things can be helpful, but not everyone's willing to do that. And again, I was one of those people that was like, that is not for me. I don't need that. That's for people that has problems. But I realized, no, it helps you figure out things on your, you can learn more, and it gives you these type of opportunities. So
when I hear that, it shows me that somebody has a fear of being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And saying that they need help. And we always talk about trust, and there is no trust without vulnerability. Yeah. It's a step that we have to take. And so trusting in the process, trusting and opening yourself up to people and learning, how their experiences shaped them and what they've learned. And wisdom is a beautiful thing too. Like older people, I love talking to them because they have so much wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think we need to tap into more elder people and find out, what did you do to appreciate others? What were some of the lessons that you learned? What does it feel like when you are appreciated? Maybe that's a question for you right now. Like, how do you feel appreciated? What does that look like for you?
I personally believe that I'm an educated individual, and I love to read, and I feel like I've had a lot of experience. Now, I'm not as older as a lot of folks. However, I feel like I've had a lot of experiences. So when someone asks me for my advice, that makes me feel appreciated. Someone say, "Hey, Sheldon, you got a few minutes?" And I have a lot of folks that I've either hired in the past or individuals that students, former students, things like that, and they'll reach out and say, Sheldon, I have this issue. I want to at least know what your thoughts are. Now, here's the thing. When I say I feel appreciated when people ask for my advice, I would also add to that if they don't take my advice, it's okay too, right? Because sometimes I spent an hour of my time, my day, to answer your questions, and then you say, I actually disagree with that. I don't think that's the path that I want to take, but I do appreciate your feedback, and we have to be okay with that too.
Yeah, we do.
Because just the idea that they wanted to know what our thoughts were, I think that should be enough. But if we feel like, well, what I told you is gold, and you need to take it as is, and don't ask no one else, and I know what I'm talking about. 20 years of all this. If that's the approach that we're taking, then what is the point of giving advice if you feel like you're the end all be all? We all have differences of opinion. Again, my perspective is maybe based off my own experiences, based off of the way I view the world, and it may not match up or align with some of your beliefs and how you view the world. So yeah, maybe you disagree, and that's okay.
Yeah, take what you want and leave the rest.
Oh yeah,
I love that. It's so amazing. All right, so I would like to know if you have any. Obviously, you have a book that you'd like to share, but if you have any pieces of advice or lessons learned, tips, anything like that that's helped you on your journey that can be a gift for our listeners today.
Besides the book you said?
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that at the end.
Okay. I would say, I'll say this. I grew up in a home where my dad was an entrepreneur. And I watched how hard he worked. I honestly, I joke with him all the time. I said, man, I thought you never slept. Like literally, like if I had to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, if I just always see the light on in the office, I see this man is always working. And so I said, that's not what I want to do. I said, I would never want to be an entrepreneur. So I went into education because I was like, I know exactly where my checks come in. I know, exactly how much I'll make, job security, all these things. That was the reason why I initially went into education. But then when I moved to Idaho and I started having all these experiences living here in Idaho, again, not being my identity not being represented much, and I just didn't know how to handle things. I didn't know how to what is this? What is happening here? I don't know I've never had this happen before. And so I started the podcast, and the next thing I know, there's an opportunity for me to people reaching out, say, Sheldon, can you do some trainings? Can you consult with us? Can you work with our teachers? Can you speak in front of our group and all these, talk to our students, all these things? So I'm opening up a business, but I'm still fighting it because I remember as a kid, I said, I do not want to be an entrepreneur. Here I am, full-time entrepreneur, running my own business. I have 2 siblings. My brother's a barber. My sister's a computer graphics designer. All 3 of us have our own businesses. Never thought that was going to be something that was in my never saw that happen. Just like I never thought I'd end up in Idaho. But at the end of the day, my message is just because you never experienced something or you think this is not the path that you're supposed to take, sometimes it's good to take those risks. Sometimes it's good to, see where life takes you because where you are 10 years from now may not have ever been in your dreams for you to be. You might have had a plan, but things change and you have to be okay with things changing. No one knew that there was going to be a pandemic that was going to happen. And so, but it's here. And so now we're making the adjustments, and that would be my advice. That is just be ready for those changes and be open for those changes that we just were not prepared for. They will happen. How are you going to respond when they happen?
Surrender.
Yeah.
Surrender to life.
Let it be.
Let it be. That's a great lead into, do you think you're living in your purpose now?
I think I am. I enjoy being on stage. I enjoy doing trainings. I enjoy interacting with individuals because it seems like people come to me because they want to learn. And so I do enjoy what I do. There's always room for growth. I don't feel like I know everything. I always tell people I just try to stay a chapter ahead. At the end of the day, there's no way I can know everything. Yeah. But I try to stay a chapter ahead. I do believe that I am living in my purpose in this moment. Right? 10 years from now, it might be something else.
Yeah. Oh, I agree 100%. That's amazing. So tell us about your book before we end.
So my book is called Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students. Here's the thing. I get people reach out to me, educators primarily reach out to me and say, okay, Sheldon, I had this situation happen in my school or I had this situation happen in class. I need a checklist. Give me a checklist. What do I need to do in order to fix this challenge? And I said, you know what? I don't think I believe in checklist. Okay. If I say I want to bake a cake, and so I got to go to the grocery store. I'm not going to get the ready-made mix, all right? I'm going to make a cake from scratch. So that means what? I need some eggs, I don't know, milk, sugar, whatever entails. So there's a checklist for that. And then pop it in the oven, do my thing, boom, 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 there's a cake. It doesn't work that way in life, right? There is no checklist. And I would tell people, listen, I can give you some guidelines. I can give you a framework. I can give you some information, but every situation is going to be unique. It's going to be different. And there is no do this one size fits all approach, and it's going to work across the board. We have schools that the makeup of our schools are so different. You got private schools, you got public schools, you got independent schools, you have homeschool, you have all these different situations. And then you have your student demographics are different, right? Some schools are predominantly white. You have some schools that are predominantly of color. You have nice mixtures of schools. You have international schools. You have all these different things. And so I can't give you a checklist as to how to challenge things, how to fix things, how to address these things. However, I can give you a step or get you on the start or the right path on your journey, because we're all on a journey. So the book is all about providing strategies for individuals who are educators who are looking for tips. But it's not a do these things and you are a certified, full-fledged member of the diversity, equity, inclusion approach to education club. It's not a thing, okay? Yes. But it at least gets you on the right path. And that was the goal of the book. So if you are in education, and I would say there's some concepts, a lot of the concepts are applicable to whatever organization you represent, but it is predominantly for teachers with lesson plan strategies, school discipline strategies, classroom management, those type of things. How to bring in culture, how to celebrate cultures that are different than mine. How do I bring these type of things into the classroom? How do I ensure that some of the basic things sometimes that we don't even think about is just learning someone's name. A lot of times we have folks from various countries and various cultures, and they're hard to pronounce. But are they really hard to pronounce, or it's just a name that I never heard before? And it just takes a little practice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff I learned in history, like we can say Tchaikovsky and Beethoven and all those aren't names that you just hear on a regular basis. We can say those things, but it takes practice, right? Those are considered normal names in when it comes to classical music and all those things. So if we can take the time to teach about those type of names, but then I have a child whose name is Juan and I don't want to pronounce it, so I just call him John, or we'll do other things. I won't say Maria, I'll just say Mary, because it's easier for me. But I think just simple things like that, just learning someone's name, how to pronounce their name, and there's other tips and strategies in that book. But I think it's really helpful for individuals, again, starting with your own self-awareness and really coming in with an open mind. You know what? I don't know everything when it comes to education. I don't know everything when it comes to working with other individuals, but I'm willing to learn. That's what the book is for.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. I hope I get a signed copy.
I'll get you a signed copy. I'll get you one.
I really appreciate that. I hope you take the time to listen, and I'm so thankful for all of our listeners and thankful for Dr. Eakins to be here today. I look forward to the next time we get to meet and maybe even talk together on stage on some self-awareness or something. I see lots of possibilities for us moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.